Could this be the end of an era for one college football program? We're going to break down a huge, and I mean absolutely huge game for the future of one team. Plus, we've got some huge SEC matchups we've got to get to, three best bets, and we're going to do it here on the College Football Kickoff Show on this Wednesday now, September the 27th, as we welcome in Ralph Michaels to the house. And Ralph, you are going to start by taking us to that all-important game here. Has the game passed Dabo by? Syracuse taking on Clemson, home dog here. How you breaking down this game for us?
Guys, that big poof you heard last week was the bubble burst for Clemson as they lost in overtime to Florida State. 2 losses for this team. They have not had 2 ACC losses their first 2 games since 2010. Does that mean Clemson will quit? No, listen, you still have a quality coach. You still have quality 5-star recruits, and you still have a team that's going to want to try to win out to get to a major bowl. But when you're going on the road, when it gets tough in the fourth quarter, those things that happened to you earlier in the season, I think do become an issue. You look at Clemson's only other road game this year. What did they do? They went to Duke. They did have a 422 to 374 yard edge, and they gained 213 yards rushing, 5.3 yards per carry. Those are very solid numbers, but they just could not score in the red zone. Klubiak, 66%. The 9-2 ratio looks good. You look at Clemson's numbers overall. They're outgaining foes by 212 yards per game. They're rushing for 5.1 yards per carry. They're allowing only 2.7 yards per carry on defense. They're passing for 68%. They're only allowing 53.4% completions. Those are very, very frustrating numbers for a team that could be 4-0, but again, they sit at 0-2. Now, let's not make too much of Syracuse's numbers. You know, Schrader has been a solid quarterback, but 3 interceptions with only 6 touchdowns are not the numbers you want to see. They played Colgate, Western Michigan. They did good at Purdue and had a 52-yard edge. And then against Army, they were down 10-0 before they finally scored 29 straight to win 29-16, finishing with a 133-yard edge. But I'll tell you what, I'm a Dino Babers fan. I like this defensive line. And when I talk about a defensive line that has 13 sacks, sacking opponents almost once every 10 times a quarterback drops back to pass, those are positive numbers. On the Syracuse O-line, a bit concerning that they've allowed 8 sacks the last 3 weeks, including 4 on the road for Purdue. But I see Clemson coming in here a little bit deflated, looking at a situation where they're going to try to win a road game against the Syracuse team that's very excited being 4-0. And the one thing I want to point out, and while I'll be keeping my eye on Syracuse, is this. They made a dramatic change on defense this year. They went to the 3-3-5. And who is the best 3-3-5 coach in the entire college football history? That would be Rocky Long. Yes, the head coach of New Mexico, the head coach of San Diego State. Dino Babers called him. He left New Mexico this past season and said, I'm going to take it easy. Guess what? He's an established football coach that got itchy. Babers called him up and said, hey, Rocky, you know a defensive coordinator that might be able to come and help the Syracuse defense? Rocky Long says, how about me? So when you're making changes on the defense, I'm not too concerned that they allowed 318 yards to Western Michigan, 75 yards on the first series on one run, allowed 403 yards to Purdue. The 3-3-5 defense takes time to get accustomed. Those players will get better as the season progresses. Rocky Long will make this Syracuse team a legit defense. I like Syracuse plus the points in this one. Would an upset shock me? Absolutely not. But I think there's a lot of value with the Qs plus the points.
All right, Ralph, great stuff there. Syracuse, Clemson coming your way this weekend, as is another pretty big game here in the SEC. And before we get to that, quick suggestion, if you're new to us here at Wager Talk TV, and college football is what you fancy. We've got all the top 25 matchups and so much more here. Content all about college football. If you hit the subscribe button, hit that like button there, you'll get notified every time those videos come available as we welcome in Drew Martin, who's going to take us to the SEC, where Georgia, good but not impressive, taking on Auburn, who's still licking their wounds against Texas A&M last week. How you doing here, Drew? Georgia versus Auburn. What are you looking at?
Deep South's oldest rivalry. Remember to say Deep South, because I think there is one other college football rivalry that's been going a little bit longer. But either way, these two teams have been playing a long time against each other, and it's a pretty great matchup over the long term. However, recently, definitely been favoring the Georgia Bulldogs. Guys, we're seeing 46.5 as the total here, with Georgia laying more than a touchdown, minus 14.5. You're looking at the Wager Talk Live odds screen for good reason. I mean, top to bottom of the roster, Georgia's got the better players for sure, maybe even the better coach. Kirby Smart, what he's been able to do there in Athens, very impressive. But where I'm going after this game, 3:30 on CBS, SEC game of the week, is towards the under, guys. We get 46.5. And I don't think there's going to be all that much scoring. First of all, start on the Auburn side. Auburn can't do anything through the air this season. Peyton Thorne, he's kind of been, hit and miss. Really throwing the ball down the field has been a tough go of it for Auburn. It's almost like I feel like Auburn should kind of just go to like run the ball every play type offense. And this is coming from an Auburn grad. It's just sometimes it shortens the game, and their defense is playing pretty well. I mean, when you look at Auburn and their outcomes so far this season, first off, they're on a 3 straight under trend. So the last 3 games all finished under by 44 points combined. So the market's kind of off here on pricing Auburn from a totals perspective. And Georgia at the same time, 3 of their first 4 games this season, 3 of 4 year to date, to the under, and their only Power 5 conference opponent is South Carolina, and that game fell short of the total by 2 touchdowns. So when these two teams are getting together, a little bit more like talent from both sides, I think defense is at the forefront here. We don't have Stetson Bennett, say whatever you want about him in the NFL. As a college football quarterback, he really made it happen for Georgia, and we haven't seen that offense really take off. And I think Auburn's defense can hold their own. I think side-wise, Auburn's going to fall short. Could they stay within the number? Sure. Tough place to play. But even more so, guys, I think this game finishes something, 24-7, 24-10, something like that. And when we get a total near 50, I like it towards the under. Last thing here, Georgia, they haven't had a true road game since last November. That was going to Lexington and playing Kentucky. And sure enough, that game fell well short of the total. Georgia only scored 16 points in that game, letting up 6. So that was a very low scoring game. Could see that happen again here in Auburn, Alabama on Saturday. So for Auburn and Georgia, Deep South's oldest rivalry, I like it towards the under, guys, under 46.5.
All right, Drew, good stuff as we welcome back in Rob Vino to the house. And Vino, you too going to hang out in the SEC for us. You're going to take a look at that Texas A&M team who's going to have a new quarterback. They'll be taking on Arkansas, who lost a brutal one against LSU. How are you looking at this one?
Interesting line move in this game. We see on the official word that Connor Wegman is now out for the season with the foot injury, and Max Johnson's going to take over as a starting quarterback the rest of the way, as long as he stays healthy. But bettors react by not moving the line whatsoever, but they move the total. Game goes from 55 down to 53.5, but yet Texas A&M remains a 6.5 point favorite. Not quite sure what they're trying to tell us with that move. But I think that 53.5 becomes a bargain where over is concerned. Max Johnson came in last week, had to play the second half. He had 6 possessions in that game with the offense. The 7th possession that they had was like a 3-play kneel down victory formation, ran out the last minute 43. But the 6 true possessions where Max Johnson was the quarterback last week, they scored 3 touchdowns. 6-play, 46-yard drive, 5-play, 65-yard drive, 3-play, 86-yard drive. Johnson overall, 7 of 11, 123, 2 TDs, and no picks. That was all done against an Auburn defense that's far better than what Arkansas has to offer. You have to believe that in perfect conditions here in Arlington and with the receiving core that Johnson has at his disposal, they can move the ball against this Arkansas team and score against a defense that, let's just look at their last 2 weeks of play here. They gave up 5 touchdown drives to BYU. 4 of those were of 45 yards plus. 1 was a 20-yard drive. 3 of those drives, though, what's important here, ended up in TDs in 2 plays or less against this Arkansas defense. BYU not necessarily known for explosiveness, but when you score 3 touchdowns in 2 plays or less, it's not good for the opposing defense. 34 points allowed last week to LSU, 509 total yards of offense, 8.8 yards per play. That makes 72 points in 2 weeks allowed by this Arkansas defense. So again, think Texas A&M should be able to move the football. This isn't Georgia's or Alabama's or even Kentucky's defense where you might consider the fact that the backup quarterback here might have a little bit of trouble, even though Max Johnson is experienced. This is Arkansas, who can't really stop anybody right now, but they can score. And that's why we like over here in this game. Their first couple of games against weak opponents, Western Carolina and Kent State. But KJ Jefferson, in his last 2 games, has led Arkansas to what are virtually mirror-like performances. 424 yards, 31 points against BYU. 426 yards, 31 points against LSU. 62 points, 31 each week. 425-yard average, 424 and 426 separately. All of that comes on the heels of KJ Jefferson being sacked 8 times in those 2 games. He got sacked 4 times in each game, yet still Arkansas was able to produce offensively. I can see them doing so here because the only test that Texas A&M has faced as far as offense is concerned all season long was Miami of Florida. And in that game, they failed absolutely miserably. They gave up 41 points. The defense did. I think there was a defensive touchdown in that game, defense special teams touchdown. 451 yards to go with those 41 points against Miami in a game where you were looking for some sort of proclamation out of Jimbo Fisher's team that they could handle those types of situations. They didn't handle it. Their other 3 games were against lesser offenses. So the only one we really have to kind of grab from here is that game against Miami. That's a comparable offense to Arkansas. Might be a little bit better, but it's comparable. I think Arkansas moves the football here. Head coach Sam Pittman had said 3 weeks ago, after Arkansas only put up 28 points against Kent State, a team that returns like 0 starters on defense. He had said that following week, I think we'll play a better football game against a much better football program this week. Well, what they've done offensively is they've played 2 much better football games against 2 far better programs with their offense the last couple of weeks. Last 2 Arkansas games, 69 and 65 points. A&M's only game where they played a good offense was Miami. That game hit 81 points. This thing's sitting at 53.5. And again, I don't really understand why the money moved total and not side. I'm going to play over 53.5 A&M and Arkansas in a shootout.
All right, great stuff there. And we've got 3 best bets coming your way. And let me remind you, if you have any questions about these games or any games coming up in this week 5 of the college football slate, go ahead, drop those questions below in the comment section. Drew Martin, Ralph Michaels, Rob Vino, they'll be keeping an eye on the comment section all week long. So if you've got a question, ask it here, guys, and they will get back to you as we welcome back in Ralph Michaels for a best bet here. And Ralph, of all the games on the week 5 slate here, Coastal Carolina taking on Georgia Southern. Interesting game. How are you looking at this one?
I am going to be on the Chanticleers plus the 6.5. Now, this is really a contrarian play. You look at Georgia Southern, and I'm going to give you some positives on Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern comes in 3-1 straight up this year. They went to Wisconsin. They outgained the Badgers on the road but they were minus 6 turnovers. Listen, you are not going to win a football game minus 6 turnovers flat out. You lose 35-14. What do you do the next week? Well, you have to go on the road to face a MAC team at Ball State. And what do? You absolutely crush them. 530 to 197 yard edge. Davis Brin, an amazing 72.5% completions. A very light YPA at 7.1. There's a lot of dinks. There's a lot of dunks. There's a lot of running backs and a lot of short passes. And when you look at Davis Brin, you say, well, my God, the guy's got a 9.7 touchdown to interception ratio. That's horrible. You have to remember, this is a Sun Belt quarterback that went to Texas A&M and threw 5 interceptions. So really, now that you're back in conference play, you have to take that 1-5 ratio out and look at the team. But I'm going to pull out a system that I had on Bet on it today, and it's a system that I really do like. And it's teams that lost as the home favorite, but had the yardage edge, and now they're going on the road against an opponent, and the line's between the 15s. So you exclude favorites of 15.5 or more. You exclude dogs of 15 or more. While it's only a 57% system, it's even stronger if you're an away dog. And FYI, Coastal Carolina applies, as does Middle Tennessee, South Alabama, and Northern Illinois. So keep your eyes open on that. For the Chanticleers, as I said, they had the yardage edge last game, 402 to 373. They still lose by 13 to Georgia State. They also went to UCLA earlier this season in their season opener, lost 27 to 13. They only outgained by 72 yards. But I think this is where the cream rises. Grayson McCall is a 3-time All-SEC player. When you have that type of stability under center, and yes, Tim Beck is making some adjustments as a first-year head coach, but they play 3 straight road games at Georgia Southern, at App State, at Arkansas State. Comparing the quarterbacks, I'm going to take Grayson McCall. Comparing the teams overall, I still give a slight edge to the Chanticleers. In fact, my power ratings in this game make Georgia Southern a 1-point favorite. It touched 7. It's back down to 6.5. But this is the biggest power rating disparity on the board when I look at my power ratings this week. That's the type of value I'm not going to pass. So while we have one team off a huge win on the road and one team getting upset at home, I think we revert back to the normal. I would say this, the Chanticleers right now, probably an 80% guesstimate that they'll be on my card for Saturday. If they'll be on my card, it won't shock me at all if I also suggest sprinkling 1% play on the money line, as I expect them, if they're going to cover, a very good shot to win this game outright. So Coastal Carolina, very close to being a play, maybe an actual client release for me, but certainly a best bet here for the college football videos.
All right, Ralph, thank you very much there as we send it back to Drew Martin Bets here. And Drew going to keep it in the SEC for his best bet. He's going to take a look at Kentucky as a small home favorite taking on the Gators of Florida. What's your best bet in this one, Drew?
Best bet video here with the Florida Gators and the Kentucky Wildcats. We're not going to have to wait long, guys. 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific here in Lexington. Big game. I don't think a lot of people realize how sleeper big game action this is. SEC East, likely for kind of second positioning here. I mean, whoever wins this game, if they can somehow pull off, punch up in weight class against Georgia, they actually might find themselves in the SEC championship game. Actually, if you're a gambler out there, you like to roll the dice, maybe take a shot with one of these two teams to, the winner here might be a good, kind of long shot to win the SEC, considering if they are able to pull off the upset against Georgia, they'd only have one game in the SEC championship game to actually pull off a big plus price wager. But either way, guys, going to Saturday's action here, I'm on the Florida Gators. Plus 1.5 right now in the marketplace. We're even seeing one start to pop up. This is a game that opened 3, so we've seen movement here towards the Gators side. I think it's with good reason. First off, on the Florida side, I think they're an underpriced commodity. Week 1 going out to Kentucky or out to Utah, in Salt Lake, kind of a unique road trip for this Gator team to the thin air. They did not look good in front of a lot of eyeballs. That was, first week out, a weekday action in front of a national television audience. And what it did is it made them kind of underpriced in the marketplace. And sure enough, we've seen dividends here from the Gators in that game against Tennessee. They really dominated the Vols at home. And I almost feel like we can keep riding that in making a little bit of money here off of the Florida side. I think they're a talented team here. Billy Napier, we know he can coach them up. He's done so in the Sun Belt. And you look at their recruiting rankings, it's pretty solid here towards the Florida side in the coming years. And on the Kentucky side of things, yes, Mark Stoops, great coach. However, we got to remember in this offseason, they brought in Liam Cohen, back in Kentucky. So a new offensive coordinator for this season with a new quarterback. And it really hasn't been all that a great shakes on the offensive side. They struggled moving the ball for portions of 2 games against 2 MAC opponents where they really should have been able to roll them over. And that's coming from a guy that bet Kentucky in one of them and got kind of a lucky cover, if you will, by scoring on the last play of the game against, I think it was Ball State. And then we also have kind of seen them, not only the 2 MAC teams, but they needed 2 defensive touchdowns against Vanderbilt to get kind of a misleading cover last week. That game was a lot closer than just that final score looked like. So overall, guys, I think we get some value here. A little wrong team favored. Florida plus the 1.5 I put in my pocket here. I think the Gators are going to win outright if you want to bet them on the money line here, guys. So start our Saturday off with the Florida Gators. I think they go into Lexington and come out victorious. That does it for me. Drew Martin, wagertalk.com.
All right, Drew, appreciate that. And ending out the best bets here, we've got our good friend Rob Vino ready to go. And Vino, love this game. I love that you picked it. Arkansas State taking on UMass here this weekend. Is it a side? Is it a total? What is your best bet for this one?
We're looking at a total of 55. We're going to play this one over. Let's start with Arkansas State, which officially, just a couple of days ago, announced that they have settled on a new number 1 quarterback. They've had quarterbacking problems there, but new number 1 quarterback here. It's true freshman Jalen Raynor, who got the start last week. Dual threat quarterback. His first start came last week against Southern Miss, a pretty good Conference USA defense. He goes 11 for 21, 233 passing yards, 3 TDs, and only 1 pick. But let's add to that the dual threat ability, 17 rushing attempts for Raynor in that game, 97 yards, 5.7 per carry, and 2 touchdowns. That equals out to 330 yards of total offense that he was responsible for, and 3 touchdowns in his first ever start. Those numbers, when you look at them close, they look somewhat, although the pass attempts would be lower, but they look a little bit like what a academy school would get. You're so fearful of the run that they throw over the top and get big plays. The yards per completion in that contest were huge for Raynor and the Arkansas State Red Wolves. Southern Miss last week, in their defense, they had no tape on what they were going to do here. They haven't seen this particular quarterback again. He's a true freshman. They didn't know how Butch Jones and OC Keith Hackendorf were going to use him. They found out the hard way. They gave up a bunch of points, sort of like what happened to TCU week 1 against Colorado. Just had no idea what to expect. Massachusetts now has tape, but I'm not sure that their defense, which allows 7.1 yards per play and ranks 122nd in the nation in that category out of 133 teams. I'm not sure that a D allowing 7.1 yards per play can do anything, even if they have tape on a squad and a new quarterback. That 7.1 yards per play that they're allowing, if we just take into context, that's versus a schedule where 4 of their 5 opponents have been Miami of Ohio, Eastern Michigan, New Mexico, and New Mexico State. The other is Auburn, You look at those 5 offenses, 3 of them rank 91st or lower in yards per play in the nation. And 3 of those teams that rank 91st or lower, they all average 7.1, 7.1, and 6.0 per play against UMass. So bad offenses chew up yardage against this UMass defense. I don't know why Arkansas State wouldn't, even though UMass has kind of employed a strategy on offense to shorten games. There's only been an average of 122 plays per game in UMass games so far this season. Despite trying to shorten them up, they're still giving up 36.6 points per game. That's a lot of points for very few plays. Think Arkansas State, which comes in as a tempo team. Butch Jones always has tempo teams. This particular squad ranks 31st in the nation in seconds per play. That's a pretty quick pace. It's quicker than what UCF is running at right now. I think the Minutemen will have to speed it up a little bit, especially if Arkansas State gets out in front. After facing Oklahoma, Memphis, and Southern Miss, you have to believe that Arkansas State's offense will do just fine versus this step down in class. The other side to this coin is Arkansas State's defense is very unimposing as well, and they have done nothing to speak of or write home about this year. The 3 FBS opponents they've played so far this season, they have 1 FCS game, but let's just take the FBS teams. 201.3 rushing yards per game allowed, 292 passing yards per game allowed, 72.4% completions allowed. So you want to run? Go ahead and run. You want to pass? Go ahead and pass. Do whatever you want against this UMass defense. This defense has been responsible for 44.3 points per game against those 3 FBS opponents. That's what they've allowed. It's not good. I think the key to the state of this Arkansas State defense is when you look at last week's Southern Miss game. Southern Miss had done nothing offensively whatsoever until last week. And last week against Arkansas State, they went for 215 plus, both rushing and passing, almost 7 yards a carry and 449 total yards. So you can see here, both of these defenses are a fade for me. Both of these offenses should be able to have their way. The weather has cleared out of the Northeast. Last week was kind of an iffy weather day up where UMass is located. However, this Saturday, between 63 and 71 degrees, 4 to 6 mile per hour winds, perfect conditions to play an afternoon game. If you take a look at Arkansas State's last 16 games since the beginning of 2022, if the total in all of those 16 games was 55, Arkansas would be 10-5-1 to the over. We're looking at 55 here. I think we're going to get over in this one. Last year, these two teams played each other, 35-33 final. I could see something close to that happening here. So we're going to take advantage of what I think is a real low number with 2 really bad defenses. I'm going to play Arkansas State at UMass over 55.
All right, and there you go. 3 big game breakdowns, 3 best bets for you, but we are not finished there. Again, if it is college football content you like, it is college football content we have for you. Go ahead, just click on that video on your screen right now, and it'll give you access to all our top 25 college football videos for this week, plus a whole lot of NFL content. It's all yours. Just go ahead, click on that video on the screen and make plans to come back and join us again tomorrow as the college football kickoff show rolls on here in week 5 of the college football season.